As we continue our day, I'm so excited to have a dear friend here with us, Georgina Valdez. What an amazing woman, what an amazing movement that you are a part of. And if you can take us through, I know all about you, okay?
Yeah.
But if you could take us through, first, the legacy that you come from. And the thing that's so amazing to me is that there are a lot of people that come from great legacies, but they don't continue it. So
Mhm.
if you can talk about a little bit about your family and then take us to what God has called you and your husband to do.
Yeah. Well, my father, he founded a ministry called Victory Outreach International. And today we're in over 30 countries,
Mm,
and it's amazing how the ministry has evolved. But we started from humble beginnings,
mm,
and how we started is my dad was a drug addict on the streets of New York City.
mm,
And he was actually the first drug addict reached by David Wilkerson.
mhm,
And so he went through Teen Challenge. He was David Wilkerson's one of his first disciples that was delivered from drug addiction
mm.
from the streets of New York. And so David Wilkerson actually sent him to Bible college all the way here in the West Coast. Yeah. So when he came to LA to Bible college, that's where he met my mother. And that's where God spoke to him that he was called to stay here and establish a church. And God actually spoke to him that he was to establish a church for drug addicts and their families.
Wow.
Yeah. And so our the humble beginnings are we actually opened up our home for drug addicts to come in, kick drugs, find Jesus. And so many of us actually my upbringing is giving up my bed for drug addicts to have a place to kick their habit. And so it's really amazing to see how God, from those humble beginnings, how He has blessed and grown the ministry of Victory Arch International. Today we're 53 years. We're celebrating 53 years of ministry, and we've just evolved and grown, and God's blessed it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so how did you, Georgina, I know you met your husband, you guys have been married for how long?
We have been married 21 years.
21 years. So you then become part of the ministry.
Yes, yes. So I grew up, and I ran from God, and I got involved in school and my friends and partying,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole thing. I think all of us siblings did that. And eventually at 19 years old I rededicated my life. And then soon after that, I felt called to the ministry. And my husband also got saved, felt called to the ministry, went to Bible college. And then we got married. We got married pretty young,
Mm-hmm.
22 years old, 23 years old. And then from there, we did student ministry. We're actually living in Bridgeport, Connecticut for a while,
Mm-hmm.
out in the East Coast, and then came back to the West Coast. Now we're pastoring in the beautiful city of San Diego.
Oh, San Diego's so
Yeah.
beautiful. We were so blessed when we were with you last year. One of the reasons that I really invited you to be a part of these conversations that we're having today with women from all over the world is that you have such a resilience, and you're such a woman of faith. And I love the ministry that you do with Girls Gang, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
can you talk a little bit about because your parents were such giants in the faith. I mean, over 600 churches all over the world, and here you are, you get married, you and your husband are serving in ministry, but yet you are continuing to grow, continuing to do big things. So can you tell us a little bit about the Girl Gang and what you do with that?
Yeah, well, I work with inner city at-risk youth. Majority of the young women in our churches are inner city the world would call them at-risk youth.
Mm,
And so I began to find out this was wow, 23 years ago, I was doing youth ministry, and I began to discover that many of them were getting pregnant
Mhm.
at a very young age, not finishing high school, becoming a statistic.
Mm.
And so I just felt so burdened with
Mm.
that. And so I began to pray, God, give me an idea, because not only were they getting pregnant at a very young age, but the
Mm.
girls that weren't pregnant were admiring these girls.
Mm.
And they too were desiring to have a little baby and a boyfriend.
Mhm.
And so I needed a God idea. I
Mm.
really did. And to break this cycle. And so that's when God gave me the idea of choose purity.
Mhm.
And choose purity started over 23 years ago, and it's literally become a movement all around the world,
Yes.
where girls are now taking a stand for their purity, choosing to be pure. And even at their weddings, one of my highlights for every one of their weddings is they take time in their ceremony to give their purity ring to their husband that they're marrying, or some of them give them to their parents. But it's a very special time in their
Wow.
ceremony where they give their ring because it means so much to them.
Mm.
And so we've seen a whole turn. Now it's rare when I see a young girl get pregnant, because we're teaching them young how to who they are in Christ, how to
Mhm.
value their purity, their worth. And so it's been a really powerful thing.
I mean, what a movement. I was so blessed a couple of months ago. Uh, Choose Purity from the Netherlands reached
Yeah,
out to me and asked if I could, do something, come on their Instagram live and just kind
yeah.
of share a few words. And, the
And they
amazing.
love you, by the way.
Oh, I love them. And the whole time I was just, the whole time I was speaking to them, all I kept thinking was, man, this is a movement that Georgina started.
Yeah,
And talk about carrying forth a legacy.
yeah,
But you've taken what is near and dear to your heart, and you have continued the work of your parents, and not just in pastoring, but in starting a movement. You
yeah.
saw a disparity, and you said, we're going to do something about this. And
Mhm.
so, okay, I know Choose Purity is in the Netherlands. What other parts of the country is Choose Purity in?
It is in Africa. We have them in South Africa, Mexico, all over South America, actually, even Brazil. Cuba is one of the most precious places, because Cuba, it's very hard to get into Cuba,
Mm.
and we have a great delegation of gang girls in Cuba. Actually, all over the world. We're all over the world, and it's just so beautiful to see what God has done. We call it the God's anointed now generation.
Yes, yes. Now
Yes,
talk a little bit about that, because when we were in San Diego and you talked about God's anointed now generation, you answered a cry for something that was happening in the ministry that your dad started a long time ago, your parents, and you said, you know what, we're noticing this, and so we're giving a call to action. So
yeah,
talk about that, because sometimes, like I know as a successor, my husband and I, we continue to build upon the foundation that his parents set, but they have really given us the freedom to hear from God and continue to grow it and not have to do exactly what they've done. And I
mhm,
think this gang,
mhm.
God's anointed now generation, is your cry to keep moving the ministry forward.
Yes. Yeah, I think that, to be honest with you, when I grew up in our church, in our ministry, it was mostly gang members, ex gang members that
Mm.
God saved,
Mm.
drug addicts, ex
Mm.
drug addicts.
Mm.
And so here we are, me and my siblings, coming up, being raised in a ministry. But at school, we went to school in a well-to-do neighborhood,
Mhm.
and so it was like two different worlds. We'd go to school, it's one world. We go to church, a whole other world we were exposed to. And so there was a time where I felt that I didn't even fit in my own ministry that my dad started.
Mm.
And so I thank God for my brother Sonny, who pastors one of our mother church. We call it our mother church,
Mm,
the founding church. And he started the gang. And what the gang is, it was the second generation, the children of ex drug addicts, ex
mm.
gang members, but the curse was broken.
Wow.
Yeah, so we didn't have to be a drug addict. We didn't have to be a gang member, but we were raised in this ministry. And so when he started the gang, it was so pivotal because we needed something that we could fit in and be a part of within this ministry. But one thing, my dad has given us freedom, but he says, don't ever lose the heart of the treasure out of darkness, because that was the
Mm,
promise from the beginning that God gave him, that he will give him treasures out of darkness,
mm,
hidden riches in secret places. And so that's the one thing that he says, don't lose the heart for the drug addict, the gang member, the treasure out
mm,
of darkness. And so we keep that in the forefront of
mm,
our heart and of our mind and everything that we do.
hmm. So what would you say, where we've been in this pandemic and in this quarantine, and what would you say to the women to offer encouragement? That's what this day is all about, to give wisdom, to give encouragement, to carry forth a legacy. What is some advice that you would give women listening to today in terms of fulfilling destiny and purpose, and doing all that God has called you to do?
I would say to discover, first of all, to learn to love. I think it's important that we love ourselves
Mm,
and that we take time on ourselves. Because I know in my life, there have been many seasons as a mother. We wear so many different hats,
hmm.
and we can honestly lose ourselves, in the midst of everything we're doing. And so I would say take time to love on yourself,
Hmm.
because it's really hard to love anybody else until you first learn to love yourself. And don't give people what's left of you, but let's give people what the best of us.
Mm,
And so I would say to really tap into the purpose. What did God create you to do? Because
mm,
I believe that God created us with purpose and destiny, and we all have a calling on our life,
hmm.
and he's given us all the gifts we need
Yes.
to fulfill that calling
Hmm.
upon our life. And so the more we seek him, I believe he begins to reveal, and he begins to place burdens and ideas. Choose purity was a
Mm,
God idea. I
mm,
don't have great ideas.
mm, mm,
God gives me every great idea I have, and it here we are 23 years later still talking about it, because it was an idea given by God, birthed in prayer.
mhm,
And so I would say, what if you don't know your purpose in life, to make that a priority,
mm.
to get in the presence of God, and then step by step. He unfolds things step by step.
Yes, yes.
I think sometimes people think that all of a sudden one day they're going to arrive and, oh,
Mhm.
I'm in my destiny.
It's an unfolding, it's a daily, it's a moment by moment. And sometimes I feel as women, we miss it because we're looking for the big, like, woo. And really, it's really as plain as the nose on your face, like what your destiny is. If you start lining everything up, it looks like you're building, like block building. And you
Yeah.
say, oh my gosh, I never even realized that all of this was within me because I was so busy looking at something else.
Yes. So
Well,
true.
I
So
want to
true.
say to you that I want to tell you this story. So when the girls Choose Purity in the Netherlands asked me to do live. Actually, when I finished, I realized that over I don't know 30 years ago, I worked at a bank called Bay Bank. That was the name of the bank, and I was what was called the foreign currency buyer. And so what I did was I was oversaw 6 branches, right? And I would have to purchase currency and keep currency at a certain level in all of those branches. But there was one currency that I loved. This is before the euro happened. It
Mhm.
was the Dutch Netherland. Okay. that money was so beautiful. And I remember anytime someone purchased that money or I had to send that currency to the bank to make sure that their levels were attained, I would always look at the money and I would say, man, I've got to get to the Netherlands. And I completely forgot about it until I was on that call. When I got off the call, I felt as if I had visited the Netherlands. And I thought just what you just said, like God is always trying to get us to our purpose. Now, the incredible thing about working at the bank and overseeing six branches is that, here God is, He's taking us to multi locations. And so this is exactly what you're saying. You're saying that there are things that happen in our life. There's destiny that God is calling us to, but sometimes we can overlook it, right? Because here I was working at the bank. It had six branches. I never even thought to put it in the mindset of now here we have we have this church, we have our church in Stoughton, we're opening up other locations, but all of it goes together in the kingdom.
It
And it's
completely
amazing,
does.
right?
It really is. Like, I remember I used to work in the finance department, in our ministry, and I absolutely hated it.
Mm,
And I would think, Lord, why do you have me here in finance? I don't like it. I'm not an administrator. I'm called to preach the gospel.
mm, mhm.
And that's where he had me. But when we got sent out to the East Coast, they put me over all the financial administration of the East Coast ministries. And so
Wow.
I said, okay, God, now I know exactly why you had me in the finance department. I needed to know that for the next step you had for me.
Mm,
And it truly is. I see it's like a puzzle he puts together. Your life just forms together in this perfect,
yes.
beautiful puzzle.
Yes, layer upon layer, precept upon precept. So,
Yeah.
Georgina, I really thank you so much for, really just sowing your wisdom into this Dash Takeover Day. And I thank you for your yes. And really, when I first met you, you or just such a lovely person inside and out. I mean, you're beautiful, you have a beautiful family, but when I came to San Diego and I saw you in action,
Mhm.
I mean, you're like quiet power. But when you get behind the pulpit, you let the lioness out. And so, just, I believe that, even as your girls are getting older and beautiful girls, all, really, in the kingdom, and God is doing like
And
great
they love
things.
you so much. It's so
Oh,
good.
I
Very
love them.
precious.
I was your Charisma's the youngest. It's
Yeah, yeah,
Charisma.
yeah.
Yeah, I saw her on Instagram the other day, and I said, "Look at Charisma is really growing up. I mean,
Really is.
she's
And
getting
she's
older.
taking those photos.
Oh my gosh, she is something. But you are, in the kingdom and in your generation and in your area. Um, what a powerhouse and very humble. To to really know that your family went through a lot and was in Boston, and your parents. I mean, they're famous in the kingdom. For them
Yeah.
to come into the church and just sit in the back, and week after week and support you, and man, what a great family. And I'm so honored that you took the time, and I know your heart in it, and just continue to run your race, and I'm encouraged by it, and I know people listening are encouraged by it. And thank you for your words that you've spoken
Can
over
I
the
thank
women.
you and your husband and Jubilee, and you have no idea what a lifeline you guys were for us in the hardest
Mm,
time of our life. We were at Jubilee. We didn't miss the service.
mm, mm.
And every time we walked in those doors, we just felt the peace and the presence of God.
Mm,
And it truly was a lifeline in our darkest hour. Not just that time, but even recently, we had gone through it again.
mm,
And Pastor Matthew, he would say, I'm partnering with you in prayer. Our daughter
mhm,
had a bout with leukemia.
mm,
He was praying with us. Again, a lifeline. Then recently went to your conference.
mhm,
Again, it was just another. It's like God has used you and your husband and the church in our
mhm,
life in ways you would never even imagine.
mhm.
Really.
Well, we're glad we have family in San Diego.
Yeah.
As soon as we are out of this quarantine, we can't wait to get back over
Yeah.
there to lay in the
You
sun. You
were
know,
supposed to come before we
I
had you guys
know,
booked.
I know. And you know, it snowed here today. So I really need to get to San Diego to get some
Yeah.
sun. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. Give Al and everyone my love, your parents. Thank you for dropping your nuggets of wisdom. And yeah, so we'll be talking soon.
Yes. Love you.
Okay, love you too. Bye.